Do you ever find yourself walking through the aisles at the grocery store and you see something on the shelf and you wonder if it's healthy or not? I mean, they all say high protein, gluten-free, keto-friendly, but you're like, what's actually in this food and is it actually good for me? Well, actually, the answer to your question lies within the food label. I wanted to make this video because I feel like a lot of people don't understand the intricacies of food labels and how you might be misled by companies that say their products are good for you. So today I'm going to show you how to properly dissect food labels. I want to start out by talking about probably one of the most misunderstood sections on the food label. This section is typically what causes people to overeat without even realizing it. Can you guess which section I'm talking about? If you guess serving size, you got it right. The serving size of your products can be found listed at the very top of the food label in bold. In this section, you can not only see what a serving size consists of, but how many servings are in the product. This is super important to understand so you know exactly how much you're actually eating. These serving sizes are often manipulated by companies so they can market their products as lower calorie options, when in reality, a serving size is so small that no one would actually eat that few of the product. So unfortunately, as the consumers, you need to make sure you understand the labels so you can make an educated decision on the products that you're consuming. And you have to make sure that every single product you get, you read the label first. Most people will eat nearly the entire package of whatever they get. So for example, if a serving size of a bag of chips is only 15 chips, but you ate the entire bag, now you actually had more like 10 servings, which is gonna run you well over 1,000 calories. And that's instead of the 130 calories that's listed as the serving size on the label. So make sure you check the actual serving size of the product and compare it to how many or how much you're actually planning on eating. This is so you can be sure that it's going to fit within your diet and make sure you're not overeating. All labels have this listed in various ways, but most are listed as quantities, weight, or measurements like cups. I always check the actual weight of the product because depending on the brand, the number of the product or the quantity of the product can change, but the weight is still the same. We'll go into this later in an example of a bag of chips that I found in the store where the serving size is actually the same, but one said 11 chips and the other said 6 chips. Now let's move down to the calorie section on the label. Calories are listed in bold directly under the serving size on the label. This is the section that most people will look at first. And remember, the number you're seeing is only representative of one serving and might be less than you're actually planning on eating. This is why it's so important to measure out your portions so you know exactly how much you're eating. Next, let's move along and talk about the fat section. When you're looking at the fat label on your product, it's important to note that the fat is separated into the different types of fat that are in the product. Underneath the fat section, you can find unsaturated, saturated, and trans fats all separated out. And depending on the type of food you have, these numbers can obviously vary product to product. And remember, generally speaking, you want to avoid foods that are high in fats overall because of the calorie content that they contain. And you especially want to avoid products that are high in trans fat, and you still want to watch out for those saturated fats as well. Moving along, we can see that the next section listed is cholesterol. Now, cholesterol is something that kind of gets a bad rap lately as far as nutrition goes. And many people don't know that you actually need dietary cholesterol for a well-balanced diet. Whole eggs are the best example of this. The yolks in the eggs are super high in dietary cholesterol, and it's great for you. And the studies actually show that unless you have an underlying cholesterol issue, dietary cholesterol, like those found in eggs, will not have a substantial impact on your cholesterol levels in your blood work. So remember, cholesterol is just fat from animal sources. And that's why you're not gonna find any cholesterol in plant products. So while this section is important if you have high cholesterol, it's not one of my top sections to look for when you're looking at a new food label. And I can say the same about the next section as well, which is sodium. Now, I know when most of you think about sodium, you think it's terrible for you. Well, in most people, sodium is not a huge issue. You actually need sodium to stay properly hydrated and to have a proper muscle contraction. And for most active adults who exercise and drink plenty of water, sodium should not be too much of a worry. But if you do have high blood pressure or any other underlying conditions, you do want to be careful about this. Also, generally speaking, you do want to avoid foods that are super high in sodium, like some of the processed box meals that you can find out there. And just like we spoke about before, make sure you're checking the amount of sodium that you're actually consuming and not just what's in one serving. Now, let's move down to carbohydrates. The carbohydrate section is broken down into a few other categories: total sugars, added sugars, total carbs, and fiber. And remember, sugar can be found naturally in some products like fruits and vegetables, so don't be too afraid of the sugar section here. So limit the sugars you get from foods that are more simple carbohydrates like candies, sugars, and white breads. The section that you do want to pay a lot of attention to is right below, and that's your added sugars section. Added sugars are exactly what they sound like. They're just sugars that were added to the product after the fact that were not naturally occurring in the ingredients. These sugars are almost always made up of processed junk like corn syrups and cheap artificial sweetener. When you're looking at a food label, you want to see as close to zero on added sugars as you possibly can to assure you're eating a healthy product. Lastly, for the carb section, let's move on to fiber. Remember, it's almost impossible to find any fiber in your highly processed simple carbohydrates. And as you know, fiber is super important for proper gut health and good digestion. You're gonna find most of your fiber in your whole grain products like we talked about in the previous module. So look for products that are higher in fiber and lower in sugar to assure you're finding a healthy option. Now let's move down to protein. If you've made it this far in the modules, you should totally understand by now how important protein is for a healthy diet and for weight loss. Obviously, you want to look for products that are high in protein so that you can stay fuller longer and make sure you're building a lean physique. Now let's look at the bottom of the label where we look at our micronutrients. While we discussed in the previous lesson how important micronutrients are to a well-balanced diet, this section on most food labels is not as important as you might think. While it is important to prioritize your micronutrients, trying to piece together each micronutrient across various food labels would be extremely difficult. So instead, I just recommend you incorporate whole, natural foods that are high in micronutrients, like your fruits and your vegetables, instead of worrying too much about what's on the label of some products. That way, it'll be much easier for you to hit your daily requirements for your micronutrients, and you won't have to worry so much about what's exactly on the label. Now, if you look along to the right side of the label, you can see your percent daily value. This section represents the percent of your daily allowed based on a 2,000 calorie diet for each nutrient listed on the label. But you need to be careful when you're looking at these percentages because remember, these percentages are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. That means if your diet is not 2,000 calories, these numbers are totally inaccurate. So I also don't really recommend you pay too much attention to the percent daily value section on the label either. This is because it doesn't give you a true, accurate representation of what these numbers actually mean for you. Lastly, let's talk about by far the most important section on the entire food label, and that's the ingredients. In this section of the label, you can find the truth behind the lies listed on the front of the package. This section lists every single ingredient that's in your product. The ingredients listed here are listed in order based on the amount of each that are in your product. The first ingredient listed on the label is contained the most in the product, while the last ingredient, there's barely any of that in the product. This is important to note because you want the first few ingredients to be as natural and whole as possible. But on most processed foods, the first few ingredients are usually high fructose corn syrup or some sort of bleached flour. Also, it's important to note that you want as few ingredients in your product as possible. Try sticking to foods that only have one ingredient, like chicken, blueberries, raspberries, the list goes on. These are what I refer to as whole foods. Also, if the product contains something like a sauce, the sauce will be followed by a parentheses and you can see every ingredient that's listed in the sauce as well. The ingredients section is by far the most important section on the entire food label because it's a totally transparent section so you can see exactly what's in the product you're consuming. This is where you'll find all your preservatives, all your hidden sugars, all your processed ingredients, your emulsifiers, and so much more. Now that we went over the basic parts of the food label and why they're important, I want to go over a few labels with you in real time so I can show you exactly what I would look for when picking a new product. So let's get to it. All right, guys, we're going to start by going over a couple labels that we find in the store and that people may not know are bad. So we're going to just dissect these a little bit, going off the information that we went over before. So this is just your typical Jiffy peanut butter here. Now, when we look at this label, the first thing that stands out to me is obviously the ingredients, but we're going to start up here with the calories. Pretty much no different than regular peanut butter. Serving size is exactly the same up here. And then if we go down to sugars, there's 3 grams of sugar, which you don't want in there either. And you can see that it's 2 grams of added sugar. So that's really where it comes from, is the added sugars in there. Where we can find that, the place where we can find the bad in this label is going to be all down here in the ingredients. You can see the ingredients are the first ingredients are roasted peanuts. Awesome. Second ingredient, sugar. We don't want that. And then you can see right here, this is the big one, is fully hydrogenated vegetable oils, which are terrible for you. So that's going to be all the stuff that like keeps it together, like keeps the oil and the peanuts together so you don't have to stir it, but it's all really, really bad for you. Like you can see there's a bunch of saturated fat. It's just no good. So when you are looking for your peanuts, or your peanut butter, sorry, the only ingredients you should have in there are peanuts and salt. That's it. This stuff is no good. It's cancer causing. It's just definitely no good for you. Moving along. Come on, let's go to the next one here. There we go. Okay, so this is another thing I found at Sam's Club. It's just lightly breaded chicken breast bites. So they're like little like chunks of chicken with a little bit of breading on them. And a lot of times when I recommend my clients to eat chicken, they go and get something like this. And you can see that a serving size is only 3 ounces and you're getting 160 calories out of 3 ounces. And now remember, these are supposed to be chicken breast bites. So if you know, the reason we pick chicken breast is because it's a super lean cut of meat there, and there's not a lot of fat. Well, you can see right here, well, there's 7 grams of fat per serving, which there pretty much should be 0 grams of fat if you're getting chicken breast. That's why people eat it. And you can see there's some saturated fat in there too. Moving down the list, you can see there's a ton of sodium for just 3 ounces of chicken, and then 9 grams of carbs, which there should be, again, 0 grams of carbs if you're getting chicken breast. And also there's some added sugar to it. The protein's obviously going to be pretty high because it's just chicken breast. So if that doesn't tell you enough, we're going to go over to the ingredients. Now you go over to the ingredients: boneless, skinless chicken breast. That's cool. Water, they're just filling the chicken with water. So that's going to actually mean that you're still going to get less protein per ounce of chicken you eat because it's full of water. And then when you go in the seasonings, you can see the first seasoning they put in there is sugar, and then they put in all the other seasonings in there. And then looking a little bit further, you can see your seed oils right here, which again we talked about before. They're pretty much cancer causing. They're no good for you at all. And then you can see wheat flour and then sugar again. And then you go down the list and then more vegetable oils. So no good. Definitely not comparable to just a regular chicken breast here. You want to go for that lean chicken breast. You can make them into little breaded bites yourself by using better ingredients, but this is definitely no good. So let's move along. Here's another one I found, and it's just these Uncrustables. If you know, they're like those little peanut butter and jelly things that are like squished into a mold. You would think that it would just be bread and peanut butter and jelly, but it's not. So obviously a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is going to be high in carbs because it's bread and jelly. So that's probably where the sugars are coming from, but you can see there's added sugars on top of that. A little bit of protein from the peanut butter, but not really a lot considering it's a whole 320 calories with 17 grams of fat. But again, this is where you're really going to see if it's good for you or not, because these numbers may not make sense to you, except there's 3.5 grams of saturated fat in there. But when you start looking at the ingredients, first of all, the bread is from enriched unbleached flour, which means they take all the nutrients right out of it and then add them back in, add some of them in afterwards. But there's not going to be any fiber or really any micronutrients in this bread. Obviously, it's just going to be white bleached bread. So you can see what's in the bread right there: water, and then a little bit of wheat flour there, and then again sugar right away, more seed oils here, the preservatives. Then you go to your peanut butter. It's terrible quality peanut butter with sugar in it, and more seed oils here, and then preservatives. So pretty much all this is just a sugary. It's just sugar pretty much. Sugar with a little bit of peanut butter or a little bit of peanuts in there. Definitely not good. You can easily make peanut butter and jellies yourself with good ingredients instead of this. So the last one I want to talk about is actually something that gets people really confused. It's the protein bars. So this is a Clif protein bar, which is a well-known brand. And you know, they market this as a healthy snack option. Let's see. Oops, here we go. So when you look at the label here, you can see that there's 11 grams of protein, but If you look, there's 17 grams of total sugars in there and 40 carbs. So this is by no means a protein bar. If you have less protein than you have sugars, it's definitely not good. You want to look for twice as much protein as there is sugar at a bare minimum in your protein bar. So you can see there's 11 grams of protein to 17 grams of sugar, and that's 15 grams of added sugars, which is definitely no good. And for 260 calories, 11 grams of protein is not good. If you ate 260 calories worth of, again, we'll keep going back to like chicken, but pretty much any lean meat, you're gonna be definitely like triple this amount of protein for that amount of calories. So, and you can see your fat here in the protein, or in the peanut butter one's gonna have a little bit more fat. Looking down at the ingredients here, organic rolled oats, that's okay. Organic brown rice syrup, which is just sugar. And then you could see all the ingredients in your soy rice crisps here. Soy protein isolate, rice flour, barley, those are just simple carbs. And then more syrup, more sugar. Organic peanut butter is good if there's no sugar in it. Peanuts, peanut flour. And then, so you get the gist of it. It's just flour, sugar. This is pretty much just a candy bar wrapped in a health food label. And then it's gonna be the same story for the chocolate chips. So that was an overview over a couple labels. We're gonna get back into the video right now. Guys, I hope this video helped you understand how to make better food choices. Be sure to watch our previous video, Building a Better Plate, if you haven't already. And keep your eyes peeled for our next video, Meal Prep Made Easy. If you made it this far in the video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to see more tips just like this. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.